Awesome. Okay, I think we are live now. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening at CU Hacking with our panel of engineers from the industry for this industry fireside chat. Just to make sure that you can hear me, can you guys who are watching let us know where you are joining from? And I'll see whether or not I can watch the chat there. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. I don't know if it's just because I don't have access to anything, but we're going to assume that you can hear us. And then Andrew, let us know. Great. Okay, you can hear us. All right. So like I said, thank you so much for joining us at CU Hacking this evening with our panel of engineers for this industry fireside chat. I'm Alexa. I'm one of the co-founders of Technolgap, Ottawa's community for women studying in post-secondary programs related to technology. Our community started about a year ago on our Slack workspace and has grown to house over 200 women in programs like computer science and software engineer at Carleton University and University of Ottawa. If you're interested in learning more about Technolgap or joining our community, Gina, our other co-founder, will be in the comments sharing links to our sign-up form and answering your questions. Hopefully, we'll get her to join the stream later. But for now, tonight, we've invited this panel of engineers to talk about their experience transitioning from school to working in the industry and answer your questions related to how you as a student can set yourself up for success in the tech industry. I'll be watching the chat over the course of this event, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop them there, and I'll bring them up to our panelists. To start, I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about your background with the tech industry, where you started, and where you're working now. Anita, would you like to start us off?
Sure, thanks, Alexa. I'd love to. So, hi, everyone. My name is Anita. I graduated from the University of Ottawa with a degree in computer science and life sciences back in 2019. While I was in school, I did internships at IBM and Shopify, and then I did an internship in my final year at Apple, which led me to become a full-time Apple engineer working on iOS and macOS on the Photos app. And so I'm saying hi to all of you all from lovely San Francisco.
Great, thank you. Madison, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi. I'm also saying hi from San Francisco. My name is Madison. I'm an engineering manager at Stripe. I've been in the industry since 2013 when I graduated from Stanford. For those who don't know, Stripe is a business that helps enable online businesses, and I'm really excited to be here. So thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Hannah, would you like to go next?
Hey, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm currently at Square. I originally graduated from Queen's University in 2019 with a Bachelor of Computing in Biomedical Computing. And I joined Square as a new grad, and I've been there ever since. I currently work on the Cash App.
Awesome, thank you. I'm also at Cash App right now, so very excited to have you representing us. Shermung, would you like to go next?
Hey, all. My name is Shermung. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. I graduated from NYU with a computer science degree, and I've been in the tech industry for a little over 10 years at this point. Spent half of that as an engineer, and then the other half leading teams of various shapes and sizes, and I'm currently an engineering manager at Shopify.
Thank you. And last but not least, Santhoshi.
Hi, my name is Santhoshi. I'm from Toronto. I graduated with a computer science degree from Ryerson University a year ago, so I've only been working full-time for a year. I'm a software engineer on the mobile team at PagerDuty right now.
Awesome, thank you. So we have a wide spectrum of levels of experience and types of companies that you guys are working at. Let's just dive right in with the first question. So something that I, as a student, have started to realize, and I'm sure many of the other students watching have started to realize, is that the tech industry is notorious for not requiring a relevant degree to break into software development. I'm sure you've heard stories of, people being in school and then dropping out and then becoming a millionaire because they started a company. But we all we all have degrees or are getting degrees. There are many skills that software developers must pick up on the job that aren't taught in school. So for your first software development role out of university, or maybe even some of your internships, what was the biggest skill that you had to pick up on the job that wasn't taught in school? Who would like to go first?
I can go first. Oh, okay. Yeah, so like I said, I'm on the mobile team. I do Android development right now, but something weird about Ryerson was that they had a mobile development course, but it wasn't open for computer science students. So I didn't actually take any like official university course in mobile development. I actually learned all my mobile development skills through my internships. My first internship was actually at a research lab, and my first project was to make a mobile app. And I didn't know what I was doing. I had no skills prior to that. So after a lot of Googling, and thankfully the Android documents are very thorough, I was able to do that. But yeah, I think that like, at least for me, when I think about university, I think more so than like specific coding languages or tools or technical skills that I learned there, I think I learned how to approach a problem and think about a problem. And I think that's, as long as you have like an attitude for learning and you know how to approach a problem, then you're good to go. You can learn these specific skills anywhere.
Thank you. Shermang, I saw you were also about to unmute.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you said that you didn't get to take the mobile class. One of the things I was thinking about when reflecting on this question is that I'm hoping that university programs have changed since I was in school. For me, it was like very, very theoretical, very academic, not very practical or pragmatic at all in terms of the courses that I was taking. And so literally had to learn all of those skills in terms of technology, languages, how do you push code to production, how do you QA and test your changes on the job. But one thing I just want to also say, just outside of the idea of tech, is that one of the things I thought was really important and had to learn relatively quickly on the job is just like the business domain and how to build customer empathy. I spent a lot of my time working in many like direct-to-consumer companies, the BarkBox, Glossier, so selling dog products and makeup products online. And one of the things that was really important is just like, how do you understand like other aspects of the business, like logistics, supply chain, finance, and use that to build a better understanding of what you're trying to build for your customers.
Very interesting. Anyone else want to take this question?
I think one thing that was interesting for me is that in school, you're kind of getting graded. And so you're like getting help from other people is sometimes cheating. At work, getting help from other people is doing your job. And so that was kind of a difference for me, where sometimes I would like sit in the corner for 4 hours and be like, I need to figure this out. And instead, if I'd ping someone and said, can you help me for 2 minutes? It would go a lot faster. And in fact, that'd be way better for my team to do that, because me sitting in the corner getting stuff for 4 hours is a terrible waste of everyone's time. So that was a big transition for me of like, I'm not getting A's. It's about my team, like getting the things done that we said we were going to get done.
I just wanted to add on to something that Shermung said earlier about hoping that the academics have changed in a way that you learn a lot more practical skills. I have a background in mobile development, but I really only learned everything I know about iOS development from on the job and during internships. And so internships were I think something that I was very fortunate and very grateful to have access to, because when you're applying for internships or co-ops or anything like that, really that's like your opportunity to come in with a fresh mind. You're not being chosen for an internship necessarily because you have a background on this or that. They need you to do this fun project. You're there for the people to get to train you and to teach you what they know, so that you can grasp some knowledge from them and be successful in the end. So that's something that I really encourage everyone to take advantage of, whether you're on an internship or co-op or you're a new grad. You're there to ask questions, so you shouldn't be afraid, as Madison said, to just like go and like talk to people, because you're there to learn. And if you're on a team that is good for you, then they should definitely respect and understand that. As for the like something that I really felt was really helpful getting into the industry at the beginning, my first internship wasn't actually a developer role. I did technical support for IBM at Cognos, and I remember there's like a little bit of a stigma, like, oh, you didn't get a developer role, but actually I think that that is what helped me get to where I am today, because I learned so many of the soft skills, being able to talk to customers and interact with the rest of the support team, and like really just like get a handle on like how the industry works and how to talk to people. So then that ended up helping me in future interviews, which also led on to future conversations with managers and colleagues. And so that's kind of like my biggest thing that I always tell everyone, like, don't be afraid if your first job isn't necessarily a developer role, because you might end up learning a lot of things that you might not have learned otherwise in a non-developer role.
That's a really good point. I don't know, Hannah, if you have anything to add, but
I had headphone technical difficulties on my end, so I missed the question, but I think we can just move on.
for sure. I noticed that there was a trend in that a lot of the skills that you have to pick up are soft skills, like working with other people or communicating, or being able to talk to people and ask the right questions to get the information that you need. And at least in my experience, that's also not something that we're taught in school. Like, there's no soft skills class. So early in your career, when you were picking up those soft skills, what are some things that you did that you thought helped, or maybe even a mentality that you had when asking a question, being like, oh, is this a stupid question? Like, how do you get past that barrier of, asking questions and getting help when you need it? Whoever wants to take this one first.
I guess I'll start. Yeah, so definitely going back to what I said before about like making sure you're in a really, really strong, really good environment to learn, especially as a junior engineer or a new grad. I always say that I would rather be in a mediocre job but have the best boss in the world rather than the best job in the world and a mediocre boss, because your manager and your coworkers are the people who are going to help you succeed and grow, whether you're new grad or like a year into your career. Like, you're definitely going to like always be growing, and you always want to have really strong mentors that you can form a relationship with and really trust them, so that you can go to them with things that maybe seem like stupid questions. Because even though they always say like it's true that there are no stupid questions, and a lot of places try to make sure that mentality is there. It's definitely, I've struggled with that a lot, even like a few months into my new grad role, where I'm like, I feel like I should know these things by this point, but then I don't. So I think it's really important to form a lot of like personal, to be able to have a personal relationship with a lot of your mentors, to have that trust, so that you can go to them and not feel ashamed or embarrassed to ask them anything. So really, like, having good mentors is absolutely crucial, especially to really finding your footing, I found.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I feel like you want to make sure that when you're looking for a job or a new internship, is that you're there to learn from the team, and you also need to recognize that, like, while it's intimidating to take on these like first couple of roles, that team is there to invest in you. So make sure you're asking questions, make sure you're like asking for advice, recommendations for like books or articles that you can read. And one thing I think is just maybe the one most important thing is to make sure that you're fostering a growth mindset. The idea that, like, you might not have these skills today, or you might not have the knowledge today, but you want to continue to grow, ask, learn more, be curious about whatever it is you're trying to get better at.
One thing I still do to this day is my Slack handle at work is mwhite, so a lot of my things are tagged with mwhite, and I have a private doc that says mwhite doesn't understand this. And so when someone's in a meeting and they're talking about something, if I feel too intimidated to ask in the moment, I write it in this like very long doc, and then I can either go Google it if it's a acronym I don't understand and see if there's an article online. Or if it's like a really Stripe specific thing, okay, I can't find that online. Now I can go and follow up and ask the question later. So I think finding ways to like, if in the moment you don't feel it's not a good moment to ask questions, write it down and like have that growth mindset of being like, okay, I will follow up with this and learn about it later, has been really helpful. And I use it like literally every day still, even though I've been working for much more longer than some some of the other folks on this panel.
Yeah, I think what Madison just said is crucial, like finding a way to ask a question. But don't forget, especially when you're early in your career, like you're expected to ask questions. Like no one anticipates you knowing everything. As you go through your career, you're not expected to still know everything. Especially as an engineer, you need to be constantly learning and kind of updating your skill set. A new language comes out, a new framework. You're going to always be touching something. The newest architecture, we went from monoliths to microservices, and we're going to go to something else soon too. You're going to always be expected to be learning and asking questions. If you ask questions, probably someone else doesn't know either. I know when I was in my internship, I interned at Honeywell Aerospace, and I had a tech lead tell me several months into my internship that what made me a good intern was asking lots of questions. And I remember feeling really, really good about asking all those questions along. Like that was a really good moment to have that affirmation. So I think it's don't be afraid to ask questions like you're expected to.
Yeah, I think just like going off that with what Hannah said, like regardless of where you are in your career, like always ask questions. Something that helped me when I was first an intern and even now, like a new grad, was seeing all these senior engineers ask questions and clarify things. Like you go in thinking that like all these senior people know everything, but then like realizing that, hey, like people are still learning. I think that made me feel a lot more comfortable asking questions myself.
And we just got this question in the chat. How often should one struggle, or maybe how long should one struggle for before asking for help from another developer? Anyone have like a rule of thumb there, how long you think about a problem before you ask for help?
I had an intern a couple years ago, and I told him an hour. It's like just a good rule of thumb. It depends on the question, right? If it's like a kind of big scoping problem, maybe you can be stuck for a little bit, like go for a walk, come back, think about it. If you're actually making forward progress and you're not stuck, I think you can do that for a while. But if you're literally like debugging something, you're reading the stack trace and nothing is clicking, there's really no value in that. So I gave him an hour.
Awesome. Okay, so to kind of spin off of that question, the technology industry is known to be very demanding because it constantly requires developers to learn and stay up to date on the newest tools. I think Santhoshi mentioned this, like even the senior developers are asking questions and everyone is constantly learning. So for you guys who are now out of school, what do you do in your day-to-day to continually advance your technical knowledge, both at work and outside of work?
I think that like if you're in the tech industry, then you're constantly gonna have to learn, like regardless if you want to or not. Like inside work, it could be like regular ticket work, or even just me like reviewing someone's code and learning from their code and asking questions. Like, oh, why did you do it this way or that way? I don't think I've had a day where I haven't learned something new. And with my own ticket work, I like Googling and, just looking for ways to make my existing code even more efficient. Like, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better library that I can stuff like that? And outside of work, I actually take courses like Udemy courses and all that. I recently got interested in data science, so I've been taking a lot of Udemy courses. And something that helped me with this as well, I think Anita mentioned like mentors, like having a technical mentor for the things that you're interested in. That's like a great asset to have, and you can learn a lot from them as well.
Yeah, expanding on that, one thing that's important to just recognize is I think work-life balance is super important. So you want to try to advocate for time to spend learning on the job if you can. But outside of that, like I guess it really just depends on your interest. So building off of that, like Udemy courses are a great way to learn things on your off time. Code Academy, those sorts of platforms. If you use social media, you can find role models in your industry that you can follow on like Twitter, for example, and they'll often share like interesting thoughts blog posts, those sorts of things. And there's also quite a few newsletters that are geared toward like the tech industry too. So one in particular that I subscribe to is Software Lead Weekly, and it just kind of gives you like a bunch of different like tips as a people lead or as a technical lead, and just it keeps you up to date in the industry.
Yeah, I think that my approach to being continuously learning is that like I kind of spend my time in two different areas. There's like the deep learning and the broad learning. So for the deep learning, I mean, so I'm an iOS engineer, and I work at Apple, but there's so much about iOS and like some of our architecture and like even like specific frameworks that I've never really worked with before, never experienced. So fortunately, at Apple, we get to do a lot of there are lots of talks that happen all the time, and you hear about them through different organizations at work. So it's nice to get a chance to like do that. And even if it's just as simple as like going and like re-exercising some of the basics of the stuff that we work on, because I think that sometimes we work at so deep level on like maybe like fixing bugs or like working on a specific aspect of a project that we forget kind of like the basics about like how to do the work that we do. And somewhat if we get like, oftentimes I've had like an intern come in and ask me how to do the basic thing, and I'm like, well, I can't remember, but let's look through the documentation. So there's the deep part, that's kind of the deep part. And then the broad part is kind of what Sherman was saying. I spend a lot of time actually on Twitter learning a lot more about things outside of work. I think that at Apple, we have a very like, it's a very big corporation. There's a lot of people talking about Apple things, but sometimes I forget about the rest of the other like amazing technologies out there. Like I learned so much about front end and the latest frameworks from just people I follow on Twitter, and I'll ask them questions in the comments, and I'll learn a lot from people through there. And I think for the broad aspect, I think I just try to expose myself to as many concepts, because the thing I'm most afraid of is the things that I don't know. So if there's a lot of things that like I don't know, I'm like, oh, okay, well, like at least I know that I don't know this huge amount of things like that. So if I see it again, it won't just completely blindside me. At least I'll have seen it before. So I think that that's kind of one of the things that makes me feel like I'm on a good track. Is if there's a whole bunch of things that I know specifically that I don't know, that I was like, okay, I will get to that eventually if I want to learn about it. That's kind of my mentality there.
So to hop into the next question then, still kind of building on the same topic, but now switching gears to specifically this interns or students at the event. Many of the attendees today are university students who may not have had a technical internship or like a full-time development role yet in their career. How can interns or new grads make a good impression in their first role and set themselves up for success for the rest of their career, both, within the company, but also for maybe future companies they might want to work at later on?
I can start. Well, if you were attending this hackathon today, I think that's an awesome first start. I know I did a few hackathons when I was in school, and it's a really good way to kind of like spike on a project. You kind of get to learn a bunch of stuff in a weekend and feel really good about starting something. Sometimes you continue with the project, sometimes you don't, but it's not really a waste of time if you don't either way. You get an awesome opportunity to try things out. Normally there are companies around that you can talk to. I think that's a really good first step. If you're interested in doing projects outside of hackathons, that's really great too. Finding a project that you like are actually interested in is key. Don't like try to like dig deep on a project that you think you should know, but you really don't care for. You'll never finish the project. You won't really learn much. So finding little things like that. There are often little ways that you can kind of spin non-technical work. Like people have alluded to soft skills. So you're still building on skills, even if it's not directly technical.
Yeah, in terms of the technical that I find is like helps me really stand out. So it really depends on how comfortable you are with the work that you're currently being assigned. But from the technical side, there are like really three core things that really help you stand out doing on top of your regular work is showing that you are really good at testing, that you're really good at evaluating performance, and that you have an interest in internal tooling. Because those three areas, at least in my experience, like are areas that sometimes engineers maybe like don't end up prioritizing, or they do that as a follow up to their future work. But like let's say like that you work on like some internal tool that helps like a bunch of engineers like be able to I don't know like look through feature history or like track like track the number of issues that have been filed like around the specific project in this time period, or something like that. Any sort of internal tool or anything that specifically like highlights some of those key components. They're things that I think people I think that they're very, very important, but sometimes they take they take the what is it, like the back seat. There's a saying that's in my head, but like they usually come second to the actual feature work. So being able to show like that sort of like intuition, for example, is one of those three areas, or any sort of additional like intuition that it goes above and beyond like what you're expected to do. Those tend to really help you stand out and say like, oh, this isn't just like this isn't just a code monkey. This is a code monkey with a brain. So, but that's just an example that I could think of.
And from a very tactical perspective, I think we get so many resumes and chats from people that are looking for internships. So that's really going to be your real first impression with a company. So get like 4 of your friends to look at your resume, and like whoever's the most grammar annoying friend that you have, like grab 15 minutes for them, make them go through your resume, because really small errors can make it super easy for recruiters who aren't even like going to look at your technical stuff to say, oh, this person didn't include this, like throw away this resume. And that's a really sad reason to not get an internship. So I would say like getting your resume really good. And if you're going to go to a conference or recruiting arena, getting your 2-minute pitch down is super critical too, because I met Alexa at Grace Hopper, and I probably talked to like 250 people a day. So I'm not going to remember you unless you have a really great thing that's really impressive, and everyone there is impressive. So be really tight on what do I want to learn? What have I learned before? Like what internships have I had? What am I looking for? And like get that so you almost are saying it the same way every time. Really helps you stand out, because I think that the funnel to get to these internships sometimes can seem like kind of like a black box. And so those are some things where just like don't not get an internship for a stupid reason. Get those all out of the way, and then you can kind of work on your technical stuff and make sure you like get chosen, but make sure your resume is not thrown out.
And maybe one more quick thing to add there, like on the cultural side of things, I think that like, you know, when you've been around in tech for a while, you have a tendency to get a little grumpy, a little jaded. And one of my favorite parts about new folks is just like the amount of energy and enthusiasm they can bring to a team. And so keep that in mind, like you have something to add. And like, again, tying that back to the growth mindset, make sure you're being you're curious, you're asking questions, you're open to learn, and excited about, you know, working on whatever you're working on.
Thank you. Anyone wanted to add to that before I hop to the next question? Cool. So kind of still going along with this us being interns thing, you know, I don't have very much work experience. Probably many of the students in chat don't have much work experience yet. And without a lot of work experience, it can be hard to know whether or not a company's team or like a company's culture or a team's culture really works for you. This is something we talked about a little bit earlier, is like people having strong mentorship and working around people that make you comfortable to ask questions and, you know, enable you to grow. But it can be hard to identify that, especially like in the interview stage. They always say, you know, the company is not just interviewing you, you're also interviewing the company. What do we look for? What would you consider to be essential qualities of a team or a company that you work for? Or what would be some red flags that the students here would want to watch out for as they enter their first roles?
Some of the go-to interview questions that I ask even today when I'm interviewing or looking for roles are, you know, what happens when a mistake is made on the team? How does a team handle it when there's like a disagreement in like a technical approach or in a project? And then, you know, what does a team do for fun? I feel like a healthy team is like a good mix of folks feeling like they're, you know, safe to admit that they don't know something. They can ask questions, they can share conflicting opinions, and it leads to just really good, strong collaboration and pushes the team to deliver just like strong results or solutions on behalf of their customers. And so I think like those sorts of things are what you're trying to look for, is just trying to check to see if, folks are collaborative, it's a blameless culture, and they have fun because they're spending 40 hours a week with these people. So it's got to be a little bit exciting.
And I would ask questions about old or other interns projects from earlier years. If the thing you're working on is not critical, you probably won't get the mentorship you need, because an engineer doing their day job is better for the company than them helping you. If your project is critical as well, they know that they should be helping you to help forward the company. So that's one I ask. And another one that I would ask is like, what should get better on your team? Or like, what are you not doing well today? I've gotten a lot of times people are like, "Oh, everything's great," and you're like, well, there's no way that's true. Like, there's always something you can be improving. And so if you're talking to a manager who doesn't have like 5 things they wish they could be doing different, that's probably not a team you want to be on, because they're just not thinking critically about what's working well.
I think for me, something that I've noticed that I don't have a lot of work experience myself either. So something that I've noticed that I like in my team is that they're open about mental health. So definitely like going forward, I'd want to be asking about that and how they deal with that. I think when you're first starting out, there's a lot of pressure on you, like that you put on yourself just to grow and learn. So having a team that's open about mental health, it'll really like push you to be open about your mental health and ask for help when you need it as well. And I think you asked about red flags. Definitely like a red flag that I've seen on like some of my previous teams and stuff that I, want to avoid in the future. Or like for someone that's starting out, is I would make sure that there's a senior software developer on that team. Like I know a lot of internships at like smaller startups or like research places and stuff like that don't really have that. And a lot of times you're the only developer there, or like everyone's kind of at your level. But having that senior software developer there is so valuable, and you learn a lot from them. And yeah.
That was a really good answer. I was going to add that to asking who you're going to be working with, like if they already know. Sometimes they don't, because that's often the case in bigger companies. Like they're going to slot in interns into teams and they haven't figured it out yet. But asking like, what will your typical day look like as an intern? I think especially now that we're remote, many companies are remote anyways. It probably looks a lot different than it did a year ago. So asking like, what does a typical day look like? Are you going to be off doing things all on your own? Are you going to be lots of contact with other people? Kind of getting a feel of what you'd be expecting day to day is a really good thing to ask.
And then I guess I echo a lot of the thoughts that have been said so far about making sure that there's a good balance of senior and junior. And I feel like I've been fortunate enough that in my environments, like I'm part of a lot of hiring processes now, and we really try to balance out the teams to make sure there's an adequate number of, if there's too many senior engineers, you bring in some juniors to like learn from them. It's all part of the learning process. So the only 2 things I would add is like, first of all, making sure that like for the specific team that you're applying for, like see if they're like if it seems like they're genuinely interested in what they're making. I've been really fortunate in photos. Everyone is really passionate about giving the best photo sharing and photo reliving experience for our millions of customers. So everyone on the team is like really excited about what we build. So I've been really fortunate to be in an environment like that. But like no matter where you're going, like ask them about like what kind of like what's like the most exciting thing like that they worked on or in the past, if they can share all that sort of stuff. And then the last thing I'll say, of course, is definitely think about how you feel about like the team you're working on versus like the company that you're at. I think now so more than ever, there's lots of talks about companies having a moral responsibility to their customers and to the world, and tech is really at the forefront of that from anyone who's seen The Social Dilemma, for sure. And so like there are days like where sometimes like I struggle with the idea of like, oh, like I work at a mega corporation like Apple, and for sure like they're like it's impossible for a company to be completely ethical in what they're doing. But I love that Apple is like they try to really strive for for privacy, and they clap back on a lot of other companies that go against some of those values, and the fact that Apple in general, because we're not selling the software so much as we sell the hardware that we're working on. I love being on the software team because I don't feel the pressure that I need to ship a specific feature just so that the company can make more money. So those are kind of some things to think about sometimes about the company rather than just the team that you're working on, because there's living at home, and being remote, you really end up thinking about what am I in the right place, and so sometimes you may have those bigger picture ideas that come in, so it's worth considering.
Yeah. And this is a question I really like to ask. But, in your current roles or maybe a previous role, what was a time while you were working where you thought, okay, yeah, I love my job. I love where I work. Did anyone ever have a moment like that and would like to share? Hopefully someone had a moment like that.
I can go first. For me, I guess, so this was I interned at PagerDuty before starting full time. And this was kind of the moment that made me realize I wanted to come back full time. So basically, while I was interning, the mentor that I had, they moved on to a different job. And I was kind of it was in the middle of my internship, and I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? I don't have a mentor. But literally everyone on the team, they stepped up to help me and make sure that I didn't feel like I was missing out on opportunities because my mentor left. And I think that definitely having that support and my team giving me the opportunity to grow was definitely a reason that I decided to come back. And that kind of that culture is kind of reflective of PagerDuty as a whole as well. So it's great. I love working there.
One of the reasons I got into people management within tech was to make sure that I was, paying it forward to the community, in particular, making sure that women in tech were being elevated, being promoted, hired into roles within technology. And so for me, every single time I have an opportunity to advance or to bring someone in who might not have had an opportunity prior to me being there is something that I feel is super rewarding. So promoting folks, hiring in interns and all of that, those are what make the job worth it for me at the end of the day.
That was very similar to my answer too. I think I had a mentee outside of Stripe who had a very untraditional path and studied oceanography, but loved Python. And I worked with her a bunch, and then she got hired, and now she's such a superstar. And anytime she ships code, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my code almost, because she's my child. But I think from a technical side too, the moments where I really love my job are when you get given tickets or you get given a project, you kind of go out and do it. But at some point in your career, you're actually, there's a problem here that no one's talking about. Let me write up a one-pager about this thing that I see and hand it off to your tech lead or to your boss. And they say, oh my gosh, that's such a problem. I think that is where I was oh, I'm not just doing what someone says. I'm finding problems and helping the team move forward. That was kind of a change for me, and how much I love my job. So now I always you should always be looking for the things that are broken and doing kind of the job that you've been told to do. So I really like being a software engineer. If that's not clear, I got very excited about that answer.
I think my sort of aha moments of excitement was when I started so I did 8 months of an internship at Apple, and then I came back full time a year later, and actually getting to go through my first full release cycle, because obviously we historically we've always released a new operating system every year, and so I get put on a project at the beginning, and then I was really fortunate to actually get to work on a cross-functional project, so I got to work with a bunch of other a lot of other first-party apps. So specifically, I worked on a lot of the cursor support, because we released a new keyboard with a trackpad for iPad. That was kind of a big thing. And so I think my most exciting moment was really getting to experience firsthand the cross-functionalness of being at a big company, because I really love the fact that I can go and talk to like a lot of like the framework teams that like I've used their frameworks for like years as a third-party developer, but then getting a chance to like actually talk to them and be like, hey, why does your code work like this and why doesn't it work like that? And then sometimes being like, you know what, you bring up a really good point, let's fix this, let's change this. So like getting a chance to really like make that impact, and then like as well like just being in like that cross-functional team with like this like new framework that I come in to like help support the cursor. Like I get into like to ask a lot of questions, almost being like a part of like the first round of people who really get to experience this new API, this new technology. I think that was kind of like one of my most exciting moments where I'm like, you know what, this is a place where I can definitely see my career growing for the next few years for sure.
Yeah, and I guess to share my story as well, it's fairly similar to others. Earlier on to my time at Square, I probably like 6 or 7 months in, I was starting to work on a project, and normally it'll be 1 or 2 people on projects. You'll have probably a server lead, and you'll have some people like a couple mobile engineers as well. And being a new grad, it's really intimidating to work with other people, especially when they're extremely more senior than you. I was working with an Android engineer who was much more senior and an iOS engineer who was much more senior. Like they know everything, and I'm just here trying to like make things work in like a monolithic code base. But we were working towards the project. It was releasing, and we found a big problem with it. And no one was kind of stepping up and taking ownership of it. And I kind of went, okay, well, this is the problem. I kept putting it out there, and I finally got them to work. And I remember having this moment like, hey, I can really do this. Like, this is going to work out. Like, people actually listen to me, and I have good ideas. And that moment was just such like a turning point, because I was enjoying my job, but I still didn't feel like confident yet. And that was such a confidence building moment for me. So yeah, I really have found ways to keep that going throughout my time at Square. And I really appreciate that Square really fosters a culture of like listening to everyone. It doesn't really matter how junior or senior you are. People listen to each other and try to evaluate people on their ideas, on the merit of their ideas. So yeah, I really look back on that as a moment in my career where like I feel confident and I'm actually good at what I do.
Awesome. So this question comes from the chat, which I think is kind of related to what we were just talking about. But Marwa asks if she can get your thoughts on being a woman in the tech industry and battling imposter syndrome, especially, you know, early in your career when you do have that feeling like, I know nothing and it seems like everybody else knows everything. What are some strategies that work for you to get through that? Or maybe who are some people in your career that helped you get through that?
We have a private Slack channel for the women and non-binary folks in engineering at Stripe. And just like a few weeks ago, someone said, like, I'm really struggling with imposter syndrome. Like, how do I do this? And I think there was a lot of great tips on there as well, but just the number of people that responded in a thread and their seniority at Stripe made me realize, like, it's not a you problem to be having imposter syndrome. Like, these are women who are like so much cooler than me, like leading organizations of 100 people, be like, oh, I feel imposter syndrome a lot. And this is like how I deal with it. And so I do think it's something that like, it's not just like a new grad problem where like one day you'll graduate and you're like, oh, I've never not had self-confidence again. It's really something you need to work on. And I think the thing I love about being in the tech industry is that I get bored really easily. And so I don't like doing the same thing over and over. But the opposite of that is feeling super uncomfortable and not knowing a lot as well. And so I think it's honestly just a balance that you have to find within yourself. How willing am I to be the like least knowledgeable person in the room? And that's when you learn the most. So I tend to say, like, figure out that comfort point where you're like, I'm happy being the least knowledgeable person in the room and like saying the dumb questions. And I think that's where you really are going to learn. So I don't really have a lot of tips for imposter syndrome, but like, you're not alone and it will not go away, even just like in your entire career. And it's not like just a women's thing as well.
100%. That's such a good point. To be glib for a moment. Please indulge me. So my partner has been one of the best resources that I've had for this. I obviously have struggled with imposter syndrome. Everyone has it, that kind of thing, sure. He is a classic white man in tech. And one of the things that he helps me do is anytime I'm like writing an email that I'm not sure about, or, a bit worried about a conversation I'm having, he'll just kind of walk me through how he would do it or how he would say it. And it kind of alleviates like, okay, why would I ask a question here? Why do I need this punctuation? Why do I have to hedge my words? That kind of thing. It really does help with the confidence there. So find yourself a white man ally.
I think for me, something, like everyone said, I don't think you ever stop having imposter syndrome. But something that has helped me kind of come back to reality is I get constant feedback from my managers and my peers. So a lot of the time, how I think I'm doing is not realistically how I'm doing. And getting that feedback and hearing someone who's actually worked with me be like, hey, you're doing great at this. Don't worry about it. Definitely helps pull you back to reality and realize that, hey, you're meant to be here. You got hired for a reason.
Yeah, I love that. That's something that I've been doing with my current internship at Square, is telling my mentor, give me feedback every week. Even if it's just I'm doing a good job, I want to hear that I'm doing a good job. So I totally feel that. Kind of bouncing around the same topic with, related to mental health. This one also comes from chat. But burnout within the tech industry also seems to be very commonplace. Have you ever experienced burnout throughout your career? And if so, how do you deal with that? Or maybe on the opposite, how do you manage your work-life balance?
This is a very good question. I think I didn't truly understand the meaning of burnout until we went remote. And as an extrovert, that was very, very difficult for me. I realized just how much of I think finding your work life balance, I think, is really important. But when actually getting a chance to go to the office and spend time there, but having a proper lunch break and having a set social structure to go along with your work really did help. So then going this is more on the topic of being remote and avoiding burnout, you really have to self-discipline is such a core element, and that's something that I still struggle with some days. And again, I think the one of the things that have really helped me with that is actually getting support from an introvert friend of mine, to kind of tell me about what sort of techniques that they go through in order to deal with burnout. So I've been learning a lot from her recently. And I think that just goes along with just getting as much information as you can from a wide variety of people about how they manage burnout. So for me, I realized I work really well in intense bouts of work, but after 5 o'clock, I'm mentally out there. I'm I close my laptop, I stand up very, very excitedly to just go away and not do anything. And I think being able to properly set boundaries, especially during remote pandemic time thing, I'm up away from my computer. Just because I'm accessible on my phone doesn't mean that I'm accessible right there. And again, that comes with the trust between your mentors and your managers and you. But that's definitely the biggest thing, is being able to recognize the boundaries that you can set.
And I think that once you do realize that you are burnt out, it's important to take breaks. That could be either through mental health days, or even just pausing what you're working on right now and working on something else and then coming back to it. Just taking that break is so helpful. A lot of the times you want to just keep going. You're so in it, you just want to power through. But really, you're going to be 10 times more productive if you take the break and then come back. Yeah, and something that I've been struggling with right now, that I'm still learning myself, is learning how to reprioritize and offboard some of my work. As a new grad and as a junior level person, I want to take all the opportunities to learn and grow. But I think I need to prioritize my health sometimes. And, it's the beginning of my career. These opportunities are going to come. So I need to really, I guess, tell myself, okay, don't sacrifice your mental health for these opportunities.
And another point on that, if you do find yourself that you are burnt out, I think it's, if you have a good manager like it's really important to talk with your manager about this. I know we have people who are people leads on the call. Maybe they can speak more to that, but like setting up that conversation with your manager is really important. I know I struggled with a little bit of burnout over the summer. It's several months remote, and maybe like Anita, I like people. I want to talk to people, and I was just losing my mind at times in my little cramped apartment. I've since moved. I have an office and things now, but yeah, I think setting up proper conversations with your manager around it, or if you're not comfortable with your manager, finding someone else in the company to talk with. Everyone's experienced burnout at some point, especially as they go on to their careers. It's really common in the tech industry. So finding someone, whether or not that will be your manager or someone on your team, or maybe someone further out in the community, but yeah, talking with someone about it is really important.
And if you're at a company where people don't care that you're burnt out, or that you aren't able to make the boundaries that we've been talking about, that's not the company you want to be at. Your career is a marathon. And if you are falling over 2 years after you graduate from college because you're just so tired, people change jobs a lot. Bernie, you don't have to tell your next job why you quit if you feel like it's not a shameful thing. Just like, that's not the culture fit that I need in my company, and I'm looking for something new. So I would say, like, if there's bouts of burnout, that's okay. Talk to your manager, like go for walks, kind of do things like that. But if this is a pattern where you're like, I'm not getting the help that I need, come work at Stripe, or like come work at any of these great companies that we're at. Like there's so many opportunities. Don't get stuck somewhere that is not going to prioritize you as a human being.
Amazing. Okay, last question before we wrap up. I mean, the unfortunate reality is that women are minorities in tech. So allyship for women in tech is very important. In your experience, what does a good ally look like, and what can the men attending the event today do to be a better ally for the women in tech in their lives?
So I can start. At Square, we have this concept of community groups. They are like recognized by the company as groups that I think we have about 14, consist of probably a minority group or some sort of common ground. So we have a women engineering group, which we call WomenEng, and I'm a chapter chair, so I'm the chair for the Kitchener-Waterloo area. And every community group has a sponsor from core leadership. And our core leadership sponsors are two white men. So we have this conversation actually a lot. And their feedback, because they're very new to it, there are core sponsors as of 2021, and they are constantly asking for feedback. So in my opinion, someone who tries to be a good ally is someone who asks for that feedback, someone who wants to correct and wants to learn and wants to grow. Realistically, everyone's learning about something. Like I am going to be someone who wants to be an ally to the BSA community, the Black Alliance community at Square, and I want to learn and I want to understand how I can be a better ally. And that's just how it works. So I think someone who asks for that continual feedback and really tries to use the feedback to grow is a really good trait of an ally.
I think also building on top of that, yeah, someone who's like always willing to learn. And then of course, like it's like interesting, like when seeing them, like, because even no matter how hard they're trying, like I know like we'll all make mistakes, even like as me as an ally to certain groups, I've made mistakes. And I think it's important to be someone who can earnestly listen to feedback and take that graciously, rather than feel like you're being like called out on something, because that's not really what it is. It's all about being like educated and being open to it, and admitting when you're wrong, even if you feel like you know the whole trick of the trade on how to support women. Like immediately, like if someone calls you out and says that like I don't like this is something that like I have a problem with you for, like it's about understanding, and like even if it makes no sense at all, like why they're going off on this or that, or if because like, oh, this is just, you're being like an ultra feminist or something, like I think even the most, I think the if I may say, even the most like extreme side of anyone who's like looking for allyship, there is some element of truth, some grain of truth. And as someone who is an ally and not an in group for this for the group. I think it's important to consider, well, why did they react to me in such a way, whether it was aggressive or just very very passive. There tends to always be a particular reason why, and I think it's good to be able to reflect on that.
And one thing I know there's a lot of newer folks on the phone, but as you grow in your career, often people look for mentors who look like them, and for women, that's often not there. So if you become in a position of power or like higher up the chain, don't look for mentees who look like you. That's the easiest thing to do. I totally fall into it all the time. Like California girl, like love people from Southern California, like really, really always kind of like sparks something in me because I have an instant connection. We love the sun. We love all this stuff. Look for people who you don't have the instant connection with and make sure that you are able to support them just as much as someone who you just like totally click with. I think that will help a lot with like both learning more as an ally and ensuring that like the future has to be better than this. And if women can only mentor women, then the future is not going to be better. So like, how can we kind of broaden mentorship across all different axes?
Yeah, and adding on to that too is not just like who you look for as a mentor as you get more senior, but also like who are you interviewing and who are you hiring onto your team if you are in the position to make those hires. And one thing like I think just like tactically to add as well is like make sure that you're making space for folks on your team, regardless of gender or any of these other attributes. Make sure that like everyone is equally contributing and feels comfortable doing so on your team. Someone gets interrupted or talked over, make sure that you're making space and correcting for that. I think that really does go a long way to make sure that folks feel like they're welcome and belong and feel like they belong in your group.
Yeah, being like a woman of color in tech, definitely like I've seen some, it's like it's tough sometimes, right? But I've also seen like some very I know some very good allies. Like at PagerDuty, a lot of the people on my team are very good allies. And I guess like something that I can say to the people in this chat is kind of what I would have expected in like university or something. Like when is being able to call out people when you see like non-inclusive behavior or disrespectful behavior. I don't think like I remember like being in like team projects where I'd write some code and then someone would just come and erase it and then replace it with theirs and no one would say anything. So having that space and like making sure that things like that aren't acceptable in your peer group, I think that's really important. And also like in meetings or classes or stuff like that, if you hear like make sure that you're amplifying your peers' voices. So if you think that someone's not being heard or like they're being overlooked, like make sure that you go, hey, so and so said this valid point, like maybe we should see what they have to say. Make sure that you're not like you give them credit though. I don't want people to like steal other people's ideas, but yeah, I think that's very helpful.
Great, thank you. There was one question that came in chat. I think it's really good, so maybe we'll get a couple people to speak on it before we wrap up. But quickly, have you ever had certain experiences or internships when you started your career where you didn't get the supportive work environment that you expected once you started? And if so, how did you deal with that? I don't know if anyone here can speak from that experience.
I think at a lot of my prior internships, like at the very small startups and stuff like that, I didn't really have that support. Like I said, I was kind of on my own and I didn't really know what I was doing. But I think even if you're not getting your support there, finding mentors in the tech field, like maybe outside of your company and talking to them and like, yeah, definitely like having a mentor made me realize that, oh, these things are bad. Like, oh, maybe that's not right. So having that is definitely helpful.
I can kind of quickly speak to it. I know when I started, I did like a long form internship. So I was at one place for 16 months as opposed to like doing it in chunks of 4. When I started, I had this really awesome mentor and he was teaching me lots and it was great. And unfortunately, well, not fortunately, great for him, he left 4 or so months in. And I had a couple months of no one really supporting me. And my output went way down. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I had been asking my manager if I could kind of have someone else assigned as my mentor. And he's like, no, like the whole team will help you. The whole team was very senior. I was very junior being an intern, and no one really wanted to fill that gap. So I kind of found someone else in the company, not my manager, but someone at his level. And he was able to kind of speak to my manager and find someone to pair it off. So you have to be your own advocate sometimes, and help yourself, find someone else who can be that person for you, and help you either be the mentor or they'll find someone who can be your mentor.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you all so much. We are at 7:15, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we'll wrap this up. But thank you so much again for volunteering your time and your wisdom and your experience this event. And I'm sure all of the attendees today also appreciated everything that you had to share. Again, if you guys are interested in Technolgap and joining our community, I'll be in the chat dropping some links to join. If you do want to join, or if you are not a woman or non-binary person in tech, make sure to follow Technolgap on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. That's the best way to support us. But otherwise, thank you guys all again so much for your time. And I hope that all of the attendees enjoy the rest of CU Hacking.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.